Welcome back to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, here to talk about our short story for a Tuesday night when this video will be premiering. And this time I'm going back to one of our constant favorites, Edgar Allan Poe and the Masque of the Red Death. This is one of his very greatest and most famous stories. And if you read Poe's short stories, like if you go out and buy one of the numerous copies of his complete tales and poems, understand there's a lot of his stories that just aren't going to be what you expect. He was a very widely varied author. He wrote a lot of different types of stories, not just horror, not just terror. He is best known, though, for a certain group of stories which have been extremely influential over the development of the horror genre. Stories like Fall of the House of Usher, the poem The Raven, The Black Cat, The Telltale Heart, Pit and the Pendulum, and The Masque of the Red Death. That small group of short stories are what most of his reputation rests on. There's a lot of other stories like Descent into the Maelstrom that just they're not the same kind of story. They're not what you would expect. They're going to be very different from stories like Masque of the Red Death. Masque of the Red Death, of course, pretty much automatically gets a top tail listing. It is one of the great American short stories and is important in the development of horror and suspense literature. Probably a lot of you watching this will already have read it in school or on your own. It's very famous. Maybe you haven't read the story, but you've seen the movie with Vincent Price. Great movie. It's about a pandemic, basically. And we've all lived through that, except it wasn't quite as bad as what Poe was talking about, because Poe is really using the situation of a viral pandemic to make the point that no matter who you are, no matter how you live your life, no matter what you have, no matter what kind of riches you have, or how big a palace you live in, it's all the same in the end. We all end up in the same place. The main character of this story, Prince Prospero, he has this palace that's pretty much walled off from the rest of the world around him. He thinks he's keeping all the illness out. And inside his palace, even before the illness was spreading, inside the palace is this life of color and richness and exotic foods and masquerades, and basically living a life of luxury and pageantry and fun and dancing and music. And when the Red Death comes through, all of that is unimportant. The Red Death gets in, despite his best attempts. It gets into his palace, and it brings him to his end. The story itself, like a lot of Poe's stories, is written really well. Written in a very engaging manner. He was a brilliant poet, and he brought a lot of that sensitivity to the language into how he wrote his short stories as well. So that it's just enjoyable to read. It's enjoyable to read aloud. And of course it does have the dark theme and the whole point about death to take away at the end. So it's everything you could want in a short story. Characters are even built well. The not really world, but the palace anyway is described in great detail. It's a brilliant work. Now, I've read this more than once. Originally, I read it way back in high school in American literature class. And I've read it a couple of times since then. And of course, I've seen the movie with Vincent Price a number of times. I think of all the Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, The Masque of the Red Death is the one that captures the story the best. Most of the others are good movies, but they're not all that close to what the story was. Masque of the Red Death really stays closer, not absolutely, but closer to the original story. And so that movie, it's a brilliant movie, and Vincent Price did an amazing job acting in that movie. He did an amazing job in most of his movies, but so many of his movies without him, were bad movies. You know, like The Last Man on Earth. Without Vincent Price, that would be a horrible movie. Forget the name of it. The one where everybody's in a house and they have to stay the night. The only thing good about that movie was Vincent Price. There's a lot of those movies like that he did, that his acting ability carried it. Of course, Masque of the Red Death is mostly about his character, so, you know, his acting was the movie, but there was also a lot more to it. There was the sets and the storytelling, the way the movie was put together. And like I say, it was kept very close to the original story. Closer than like The Raven, which is kind of a silly movie, or Pit and the Pendulum, or movies like that. So it as movie adaptations go, The Masque of the Red Death with Vincent Price is about it. It's about as good as it gets. And so I recommend that too. But mostly we're here to recommend literature. I recommend you read the short story Masque of the Red Death if you've never read it. Top tail. Really can't say too much more than that. So that's it for this time. Come back and join us for our next video. Like us, subscribe to us, check out our Instagram, Facebook, website, and follow along as we travel a journey through literature.